You can be lying down, you can be in silence, you can have your body relaxed, and still not be resting. This is one of the most confusing experiences many people live through. The day ends, the tasks are finished, the lights go out, the environment becomes quiet. But inside, something keeps running, something stays alert, something keeps watching, as if a part of you were standing guard, as if the system were still checking whether everything is safe. And here is the direct answer, right at the beginning. You are not resting because your brain is still monitoring. It keeps scanning the environment. It keeps evaluating signals. It keeps looking for changes. It keeps checking for risks. Even when you are lying down, even when your body has stopped, even when the day is over, this is not a lack of rest. This is vigilance. And vigilance consumes energy, a great deal of energy, far more than most people realize. Because the brain does not measure effort only by how much the body moves. It measures effort by how much attention it has to maintain. If the system needs to stay alert, it is working, even in silence, even in stillness, even in the dark. And that is why some people wake up tired after spending an entire night in bed. Not because they slept too little, but because the brain never fully shut down. It remained in a state of monitoring. It kept observing. It kept checking. It kept evaluating. This happens for a very clear biological reason. The brain was designed to detect risk before the risk appears. It does not wait for the problem to happen. It tries to predict the problem. It tries to anticipate the problem. It tries to prevent the problem. And to do that, it has to monitor. This monitoring is automatic. You do not decide to do it. You do not notice when it begins. You do not control when it ends. It happens in the background. Quietly, continuously, there is a system in the brain responsible for this. A system that works like a radar. It observes the environment. It observes the body. It observes other people. It observes signals. It observes changes. And this system asks one question all the time. Is it safe? That question is repeated thousands of times every day, without words, without awareness, without intention, simply as a reflex. If the answer feels uncertain, the system stays alert. If the answer feels predictable, the system relaxes. But there is an important detail. The brain does not need real danger to remain attentive. It only needs uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of the most common experiences of modern life. Messages that have not yet been answered. Decisions that have not yet been made. Results that have not yet arrived. Changes that might still happen. None of these are physical threats, but all of them require monitoring. Because the brain prefers to check. It prefers to confirm. It prefers to make sure. And that creates a very specific internal state. A state of quiet vigilance. You may not feel fear. You may not feel intense anxiety. You may not feel panic. But there is a subtle tension, a constant awareness, a sense of alertness, as if the system were waiting for something. And that feeling prevents deep rest, because real rest requires perceived safety, not objective safety, perceived safety. The body only relaxes completely when it believes it is safe. If there is any doubt at all, the system stays active, even if that doubt is small, even if that doubt is vague, even if that doubt is unconscious. Another important factor is memory. The brain learns from past experiences. If something required vigilance before, it records that. If something was unpredictable before, it remembers. If something caused discomfort before, it prepares. That means the system can remain alert even after the danger has passed. Not because of a mistake, but because of precaution. Imagine an alarm that has been triggered many times. Even after the risk disappears, it remains sensitive. Any small signal can reactivate it. The brain works in a very similar way. If there have been periods of prolonged stress, it adapts. It increases vigilance. It increases monitoring. It increases attention, and when the situation improves, the system does not shut off immediately. It needs time to trust again. Time to recognize that the environment has changed. Time to reduce vigilance. This process is gradual, slow, progressive. Because the brain's priority is not relaxation, it is protection. Another important idea is the energetic cost of attention. Thinking consumes energy. Deciding consumes energy. Monitoring consumes energy. But maintaining constant vigilance consumes even more energy because it requires continuous activity, continuous evaluation, repeated processing, and this happens even when you are not doing anything, even when you are sitting, even when you are still, even when you are trying to rest. If the system is monitoring, it is spending energy, and when energy is spent without enough recovery, fatigue appears, not muscular fatigue, but mental fatigue. The kind of tiredness that is hard to explain, the kind of tiredness that does not improve with physical rest alone, the kind of tiredness that remains even after sleep. That fatigue is connected to invisible brain activity, to ongoing vigilance, to constant monitoring, to quiet attention. Another mechanism involved in this process is error detection. The brain is constantly trying to predict what will happen next. When reality does not match that prediction, it detects a mismatch. And when it detects a mismatch, vigilance increases because mismatch signals risk. It signals uncertainty. It signals the need for attention. That helps explain why periods of change can feel so exhausting. Change requires adaptation. Adaptation requires monitoring. Monitoring requires energy. The greater the change, the greater the demand on the system. Another essential factor is the role of the autonomic nervous system. This system regulates internal states. It controls the level of activation in the body. It determines when to speed up, when to slow down, when to rest. But that decision depends on one central condition: safety. If the system detects safety, it allows relaxation. If it detects uncertainty, it maintains vigilance. The logic is simple, but powerful, and it explains why some people struggle to relax even in calm environments, because the brain does not evaluate only the external surroundings. It evaluates history, it evaluates memory, it evaluates lived experience. If there have been long periods of alertness, the system adapts. It learns to stay attentive, it learns to monitor, it learns to check, and that learning does not disappear quickly. It has to be replaced by new experiences. Experiences of safety, experiences of predictability, experiences of stability. Without those experiences, the system keeps operating in the old mode, a mode of vigilance, a mode of monitoring, a mode of protection. Another important distinction is the difference between physical rest and neural rest. The body can stop, but the brain can remain active. The body can be still, but the mind can keep observing. The body can appear relaxed, but the system can remain alert. That happens because true rest depends on neural deactivation, not just physical stillness. If the brain continues to evaluate risk, it remains active. And if it remains active, rest becomes partial, shallow, incomplete. That kind of rest does not fully restore energy. It does not reorganize the system. It does not reduce accumulated strain. And that is why the feeling of fatigue lingers. Another relevant factor is the internal environment. The brain monitors not only the outside world, it also monitors the body, heart rate, breathing, muscle tension, physical sensations. If the body sends signals of tension, the brain interprets alertness. If breathing becomes shallow, the brain interprets vigilance. If muscles remain tight, the brain interprets risk. And this creates a loop. The body sends signals. The brain responds. The brain increases vigilance. The body increases tension. And the cycle continues, even without a real threat, but with the perception of risk. This cycle is quiet, automatic, persistent, and it can last for hours, days, even weeks, until the system receives enough signals of safety, signals that are repeated, consistent, predictable. Only then does vigilance begin to decrease. Only then does monitoring begin to ease. Only then does deep rest become possible. And that is why some people say, "I feel tired all the time. I can't relax. I can't switch off. I rest, but I don't feel rested." These statements describe this exact phenomenon. It is not a lack of rest. It is an excess of monitoring. It is not a lack of sleep. It is a lack of neural deactivation. It is not weakness. It is prolonged vigilance. And understanding this changes how you interpret your own fatigue. Because when you realize the system is still monitoring, you begin to see that the body is not failing. It is protecting. It is trying to maintain safety. It is trying to avoid surprise. It is trying to prevent risk, even when that risk no longer exists, even when the danger has passed, even when the environment is safe. The brain continues to check until it is certain, until it trusts again, until it recognizes stability. And that process requires time. It requires repetition. It requires consistency. Because biological trust does not come from a decision. It comes from experience, from repetition, from predictability. And that leads to an important question. If the brain keeps monitoring even while you are resting, if the system remains vigilant even in silence, if the mind keeps observing even when the body is still, then what exactly is it looking for? Because monitoring is never random. It always has a purpose, always a direction, always a focus. Even if you are not consciously aware of it, the brain does not observe out of curiosity. It observes out of precaution. It looks for signals that indicate change, signals that suggest instability, signals that point to risk. And when those signals are not clearly visible, it keeps searching. This is where many people become confused. They assume that rest depends only on stopping work, stopping movement, stopping tasks. But real rest does not depend only on stopping. It depends on stopping the monitoring. It depends on reducing vigilance. It depends on allowing the system to trust the environment. Because while the brain is still searching for signals, it remains active. While it is evaluating possibilities, it is still working. While it is checking for safety, it is still consuming energy. Even if the body is completely still, even if the room is quiet, even if the day is over. Another factor that keeps monitoring active is responsibility. Responsibility creates attention. Attention creates vigilance. Vigilance creates effort. And prolonged effort creates fatigue. This happens because the brain interprets responsibility as potential risk. Not physical risk, but the risk of error, the risk of failure, the risk of consequences. When something depends on you, the system stays alert. It tries to predict outcomes. It tries to prevent problems. It tries to maintain control. This mental effort is invisible, but constant, and it consumes energy. Another important element is anticipation. The brain tries to imagine what might happen. It simulates scenarios. It simulates outcomes. It simulates possibilities. This process is useful. It supports decision-making. It helps avoid mistakes. It helps prepare for the future. But when anticipation becomes continuous, it turns into vigilance. And continuous vigilance prevents rest, because the system cannot relax while it is still rehearsing potential threats. Another relevant aspect is emotional uncertainty. Not all vigilance comes from external situations. Sometimes it comes from internal states, expectation, concern, doubt. These states keep the brain active. They keep the system evaluating. They keep the mind observing, even in safe environments. That helps explain why some people feel exhausted on days that seem calm on the surface. Because the effort is not in the body, it is in the mind. It is in the monitoring. It is in the constant attention. Another important idea is the limit of recovery. The body can recover, but it needs time. It needs pauses. It needs deactivation. If monitoring never decreases, recovery never completes. And when recovery remains incomplete, fatigue accumulates. That accumulation does not happen dramatically. It happens slowly, day after day, week after week, until a persistent feeling appears, a feeling of heaviness, a feeling of depletion, a feeling that something is always draining energy. Even when you are not doing anything, This is not imagination, it is physiology. Another mechanism involved in this process is selective attention. The brain cannot observe everything at once, so it chooses what to observe. It chooses what to monitor. It chooses what to consider important. This process is automatic, and very often, it prioritizes potential problems. Because problems demand response, they demand action, they demand energy. Over time, this creates a pattern. The mind learns to look for what might go wrong. It learns to detect flaws. It learns to identify risk. And when that pattern repeats for long enough, it becomes habit. A quiet habit, a mental habit, a habit of monitoring. Another essential factor is predictability. When the brain knows what to expect, it relaxes. When it understands what is coming next, vigilance decreases. When it recognizes stable patterns, it conserves energy. But when the future feels uncertain, attention increases. Monitoring increases. Effort increases. That is why periods of transition can feel so draining. Change requires adaptation. Adaptation requires monitoring. Monitoring requires energy. And limited energy leads to fatigue. Another important factor is sensory overload. The brain receives thousands of stimuli every minute. Sound, light, movement, information. Each stimulus requires processing. Each piece of information requires evaluation. When the volume of stimuli increases, mental effort increases, and when mental effort increases, the need for rest increases. But if monitoring continues, rest never fully arrives. This is one of the central paradoxes of modern life. More stimulation, less recovery, more monitoring, less real rest. Another relevant idea is effort memory. The brain records periods of intense effort, and afterward, it remains prepared to repeat that effort, even when it is no longer necessary. This happens because adaptation fades slowly. The system learns to protect quickly, but it unlearns slowly. That is why monitoring can continue even after the situation has changed, even after the risk has passed, even after the environment has stabilized. Another important element is silence. Silence can look like rest, but for a system accustomed to vigilance, silence can feel like threat, because silence removes distraction. It removes movement. It removes predictable signals. And when those signals disappear, the brain increases attention. It begins searching for any sign of change, any sound, any movement, any signal. That helps explain why some people feel more alert at night. Because the environment becomes quiet, and quiet demands monitoring. Another relevant factor is the relationship between control and safety. When you feel in control, the system relaxes. When you feel uncertain, the system watches. Control reduces vigilance. Uncertainty increases vigilance. The logic is simple, but powerful, and it helps explain why unfinished tasks keep the mind active. Because something incomplete represents uncertainty, and uncertainty requires monitoring. Another essential factor is divided attention. When the brain has to monitor several things at the same time, effort increases, energy spreads thin, efficiency drops, and fatigue emerges. This kind of effort is common in modern life. Multiple responsibilities, multiple decisions, multiple demands. All of these require simultaneous monitoring, and simultaneous monitoring consumes energy quickly. Another important mechanism is preventive vigilance. The brain tries to avoid problems before they appear. It checks details, reviews possibilities, analyzes scenarios. This behavior is useful, but when it becomes constant, it prevents rest. Because the system never feels finished, never feels released, never feels completely safe. And that creates a sense of continuous activity, a sense that the mind never stops, a sense that rest is never enough, and that feeling can lead to frustration, to doubt, to self-criticism. But the explanation is simple. The system is still monitoring, not because you want it to, but because it learned to. It learned to observe. It learned to check. It learned to anticipate. And now it continues automatically. Another relevant aspect is adaptation to stress. When stress lasts for a long time, the brain adjusts its level of alertness. It resets the baseline. What used to be temporary becomes normal. What used to be exceptional becomes routine. That means the system can remain vigilant even in safe environments, because that state has become familiar. Another important idea is deep rest. Deep rest is not just the absence of movement, it is the absence of vigilance, the absence of monitoring, the absence of alertness. When these elements decrease, the body recovers. When they remain active, rest becomes partial. That is why some people say, "I slept, but I am still tired. I stopped, but I did not relax. I rested, but I did not recover." These statements describe this exact experience. The body stopped, but the system kept monitoring. Another essential factor is time. The brain needs time to reduce vigilance, time to rebuild trust, time to recognize stability. This process is not instant. It depends on repetition. It depends on consistency. It depends on predictability. The more experiences of safety the system receives, the more it relaxes. The fewer experiences of safety it receives, the more it watches. That is the biological logic. Simple, direct, and powerful. And understanding this changes how you interpret your own fatigue. Because the problem is not a lack of rest, it is an excess of monitoring. It is not a lack of sleep, it is a lack of deactivation. It is not weakness, it is prolonged vigilance. And when this understanding appears, something shifts. Guilt softens, frustration eases, self-criticism loosens. You begin to see that the body is not failing. It is protecting. It is trying to keep you safe, even when it feels excessive, even when it feels unnecessary, even when it feels exhausting. And that realization opens the door to a new question. If the brain keeps monitoring, if the system keeps watching, if the mind keeps checking, then what exactly is it searching for? The answer can be surprising. Most of the time, it is not searching for real danger. It is searching for potential problems, possibilities, mistakes, failures, risks. It is scanning the environment for what might go wrong. And this process happens all the time, quietly, automatically, without pause, without rest, like a radar that keeps turning, like a search system that never switches off. And that is exactly what we will explore next. How the mind learns to scan the world for problems, why that scanning becomes automatic, and why, even in safety, the brain keeps searching for signals. Because many times, you are not just monitoring, your mind is scanning.